Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it is Thursday. It is March 3rd, and this will be our chart lesson for today. And once again, I thought I'd start out showing you the daily chart. Things still look sideways to slightly up. Looks like we're still in this little tight congestion area here. Notice that we still made a higher high and a higher low and a much higher low, but we closed lower than yesterday. We closed down from yesterday. So this looks almost like it looked like it was going to close as a reversal, but it really closed as just kind of a neutral indecision kind of bar. So I think we're just still working sideways here. We may work back down to the other side again now and test the lows again. So we'll just have to see. We could continue to weekly work higher here, or just work higher here in a very weak manner is what I'm trying to say there by weekly. Um, Weekly is in strength, not time period. So anyway, we'll see what happens there. And it's just kind of a neutral kind of sideways down day. And that's kind of how I expected the day to go early on. And that's kind of it. We actually traded a little bit lower than I expected. It wouldn't have surprised me at all to see a completely reversal bar and us trend down tomorrow. That wouldn't surprise me one bit because we've traded up and we're finding strong resistance at the midline, so we could trend back down again. But this still just looks like more of the same sideways. But the fact that we're still, these last two bars have made a higher high and a higher low, and we closed extremely high, and we didn't close much off yesterday's high, but we closed down. So again, let's just flip over to the chart, go through the trades, and we'll see what tomorrow brings. But no chart lessons on Fridays, so this will wrap it up for the week, and we won't be back again until Monday. But let's flip over to the other chart and go through the trades. And there's not a lot of trades today, but you'll see as we get over there. But here's a look at in the big picture, and you can see we had this. It looked like we were going to trend down, got a break at a new low, and you would think we would reverse, but all we got was two legs higher, and then we trended down. And once we started going lower, your target's going to be the close from yesterday and then the lows. But we just shot on down through that before we rallied. And really from about 10, most of the rest of the day, we rallied right up until about 2 o'clock. And then we sold off around 2 o'clock. Of course, we bounced off that low. But that was a pretty strong sell-off. So you would have probably been looking for a measured leg. Of course, there's not enough time for that. And it didn't matter anyway because we bounced off that. And there's about 5 or 6 minutes left before the market closes, so I don't expect it to do much more than what it's done right here. So, early on we were looking at a possible range. And notice too, there was a gap. This is the yellow line is where we opened, and so the close yesterday was way up here. Actually, it would have been here because this was during the overnight. Technically, I take that back. This would be the gap because this is before 4 o'clock, so this is still in yesterday's trading. So this was the high of yesterday. So anything between here and there on the normal market will be a gap because this trading's not in here except on the 24-hour chart. So hopefully people get really confused with this. Just assume from this line to this gray would not be there, and this is where the market would open when it opened at 8:30, a regular session. And so there's a gap between there and there. And generally the market's going to feel that pretty quickly. So it didn't surprise me at all to see us trade down. But once we filled that, you would hope we'd go higher. If not, generally the next target is the previous day's close. And if that doesn't hold, then it's going to be the lows. And then if that doesn't hold, then it's probably going to be a downtrend day. And you'd have to start watching. And you can see the next really strong support was way down here. And that's what we tested before it bounced. So that's kind of how I look at it and look. And of course, once we corrected, you'd start looking for that measured leg down. And we didn't, we had a pretty good move, but it's nowhere near a measured leg. I will say that if you start from here, we might have got close. Let's just see where we got to. See, we got close. I would call that close, but that's not a measured leg down. And generally, if you don't hit a measured leg, that means you're going to trade pretty strongly in another direction. So we could still work higher from here. We'll just have to see. But let's back out. And again, there's not a lot of trades today. You can see that there's a lot of movement. We just didn't get a lot of good setups. So you had to be patient this morning. We didn't get a really good setup till almost 9 o'clock. Uh, so there's one reversal right here that you might have taken. We'll talk about that when we get to it. I didn't mark it, but you might have taken that trade. So, but 7 o'clock came right here in this bounce, and that's a higher low. But you can see how tight. I mean, it's right into the resistance right there, and you just can't go long right there. You needed to see it push higher and pull back and give you a failed second entry, but it didn't. It just kept going, and it never really gave you another good opportunity to enter. I mean, this was a really strong move up, and of course we ran up here. We got a little bit of an overshoot, and then pushed higher, and you actually had a second entry short right here, and that's another one. The problem is this bar made your high, so that's your signal bar. But the second entry didn't trigger till it broke below that bar. So it's just a little congested, and you can get real chopped up in that. It could have broke lower and pushed higher one more time. So I think you need to wait on a reversal. And so um, I just don't like it. I mean, I like that trade, but I'm real scared of it because those can burn you. And so I didn't mark it. I'm not even going to mark it green. Because this was a really strong trend, so you're really trying to pick a top at that point. So wait till you get a confirmed trend, and that's right here. And also, this makes a new swing high. There's a little high right there, and then a new high. So that makes a new swing high. So this is a failed second entry long, and it confirms the trend line. It's not a second entry short, but if you see the failure there, you could take that trade. And that turns out to be a quick, easy scalp. I marked it green, but you could almost argue for that to be red. But it's just a little bit more advanced, and so I didn't feel comfortable making it red. And then, of course, you do get a second entry here, but again, it's an inside bar. Uh, the EMA is getting really flat. It almost looks like we're going into a range right here, and you could actually draw a range right here. And so there's still probably room to get out right there if you took it. But anytime you enter on an inside bar, you're asking for possibility. And you see it did bounce there, but it ends up going lower. And so it does break higher and give you a failure right there. I didn't mark this one because it's such a huge bar. It's 30 ticks almost. But if you entered it on an engulfing bar, and again, you're going short right into the lows to do that. So I didn't mark it. But with it being a trap, it's probably going to give you a scalp. So it's another one you could argue for. This was just one of those kind of days where you don't get a lot of really good setups. They're there, but there's something nagging in the background that makes you scratch your head and say, this is not a perfect setup. This is not a high probability trade. And if you take anything but high probability trades, you're going to have losers, and you may have more losers than you do winners that day, and you're going to have a losing day. So I'd rather sit tight and wait on something that I know is going to give me a sure thing. That's my opinion. So anyway, we bounce here. We finally get you could argue we got a break in a new low, but this is like really, I mean, you could draw this slightly different, and then you don't have a break there. So, I mean, that still fits very nicely, and then you don't really have a break there, and you don't get your break till here. So I don't think that was a convincing break outside. So we drop on down, and you get your close outside here, and there is a second entry. You don't want to take that. Look at the congestion above the EMA, and this is what happens. It bounces. But because of the congestion and the sideways and not much room there, I'm not crazy about, you're not really looking for a reversal yet, so I'm not crazy about taking a reversal. It's another one you could argue for to be green because it's probably going to trap people. I don't think you could have got in this trade, to be honest, because it gaps over and because it runs the stops real quick. But as soon as it had run the stops and ran out of momentum, the bottom just fell right out of it. And unfortunately, you don't really get a chance to trade that. There's no close outside this trend line yet. There's no lower high. The bottom falls out of it. And of course, you're looking for a retest of the lows, so we got it. It looked like maybe we were going to reverse now, and you just get a first entry and a second entry and a big, nice bearish bar. It's right at the EMA, but I think it's fine to go short right there. It's just such a bearish bar. There's a couple of ticks on it, but that's because it bounced right at the EMA. So maybe you let it break lower and try a little limit order just to get a little room. But I think your best just put a sell stop there and hope you get another leg down, because that's what you would expect to happen there. And of course, instead, we really start another trend here. And you could maybe argue there's two legs back right here, but this makes such a lower low and it just looks sideways with a failed breakout. So I'd wait on something a little better. And then finally you get a lower high here. I like going short on that. There's a failure here, but it's not back to the EMA. It's not really where you're looking to see a failure. It's just not a good. I mean, it runs down and makes a great move, but it's just not it's not high probability. And then finally you make a new low here, and you get a first entry, and then you get a second entry, and so technically that's a third entry, but it's right at the key entry point, and look at the resistance there, and it's a triple test with a failed break higher. I like that trade. And if you weren't brave enough to enter there, you get this lower high here again right off the key entry point. And you probably could argue that it got confirmed here, but we didn't quite touch right there. So, but it definitely got confirmed here. And look how bearish. I like that one. And if you catch that one, you got your runner going here. At this point, you got to be thinking about these lows and what might happen. But it just kind of it pushes straight through there and then finds resistance and then takes off to the downside. And you might argue there's a triple test right there, but being right in the middle of that range, not back to the key entry point, and being that far away from the EMA, you just can't justify that trade, in my opinion. But if you wait a few minutes, you get another lower high right here that looks almost like a repeat pattern of what we've been seeing down through here. It's not a perfect signal bar, so I only marked it green, but I think it's still, with it being a repeat pattern. And you could really argue there's two legs back to the EMA and say, hey, that looks like a second entry short as well. But it's definitely, we try to go higher 3 times. It's a lower high. It's at the key entry point, the EMA. Lots of reasons to take that. And then you really see it happen again. This is actually almost a repeat pattern of this, other than it doesn't make a lower high. It's a higher high. So that kind of changes the pattern, but it looks almost exactly the same. And again, you might argue you try to go higher 3 times there. And you can see that across there. So yeah, if you took that, it's a small bar, relatively low risk compared to what we've been seeing. And you can see there it's what, 9 ticks. I mean, I can remember a day when that was a relatively large bar, but right now that's about as little as it gets. And it turns out to be a good trade. And that is the first break of the trend line. So there's reasons to take that trade. I'm not crazy about it. I didn't mean to mark it red. I'm just going to mark it green. But it's right there. You could take it. And we do drop down and make a new low, and then we just rally straight out of there. There's no way to really enter that before you even start to get a tick or two correction. We're way up here, and it's just too late. And again, you get a triple test, but that's too congested. Everything's still above the EMA. You can see it worked, but notice how it bounced, and sometimes it'll stop you out, and it's just not worth it. But we do make another push up, and then we try to go higher once, twice, and so you could look at that as a failure, and you can see it looked like a little tight range here, and then you get the measured move that dropped it down to here, and so I just made the range that big. But this looks like a failed breakout, 3 attempts to go higher, and a really nice bearish bar to trade back into the range, and it comes straight back down to the lows and bounces again. And so that's what makes this really hard, is because after this point we're going higher here, but there's like a huge run up, a huge run down, a huge run up. It's just really hard to trade. So you just got to step back and look at the big picture and say, hey, the big picture is up here. So, but anyway, prices run up. We get a break, a new high, and they come down. That's really tempting right there, but that's a lot of momentum. But we're so far away from the EMA, and you can see there's clearly 2 legs up there. Really nice reversal bar right where you would expect the measured move to be, or the top of the channel to be, I guess you should say. So you might take that trade. I think you're better off to wait on a lower high. And once again, you don't get one. The bottom just falls out of it. You get a break, and you don't even quite get a new low. You make a double bottom, so it tries again to make a new low. And that's a second entry short, but that's your signal bar, and it's too neutral. So, and then of course it fails, and so you could look at that as a failure, but you're not really looking for a failure there. So, and you actually get another little jog there, but I just don't think you can enter that. And then you're just kind of going sideways here. Congestion above the EMA, so you can't go short. There's no longs. And then finally, you do kind of get a little reversal here. You shoot straight down. You try to go higher once, twice. And so now you got a failed second entry. You got a little channel working lower here. Maybe you risk that short right there. This is actually your signal bar, or this is this hot bar that makes the high, so your stop has to go above that, your safety stop. But you would enter, the failure happens one tick below that bar, so that's where you got to enter there. And then we drop on down. And then, of course, you get your break, and it tries to make a new low, and it can't. And then it rallies up here, and you're going sideways. You get a little failed breakout. I like this for a long because it does bounce it off and confirm that trend line. And it's a little failed break out of that little range right there, and it's at the very low, so you got plenty of room to get out. And this thing, you can tell it hit the stops, and look at it, but it runs straight up, and it just runs the stops. And of course, you run all the way up in one move. You get the close outside and a new high, really all in one bar. And then you get a lower high here. So finally, you do get a lower high, and that's a little safer entry. Again, you might have entered there, but that's the first close outside. So even though you did make a new high there, there's still a chance this could make a new high. So you got to really wait for it to close and see what it does. And now you got plenty of room back. There's a failure here, but it's not setting up like a failure. It's not really where you want to look for one. Of course, it runs back to the trend line, and it doesn't hold, and the bottom just falls out of it again. So it's just one of those days where the market does not know what it wants to do. And when it does do something, it does it very strongly. So that was a really nice move. And if you got in up here, you catch it. But you might have considered entering right there. That's a failed second entry long. But by the time that bar closed, it just really looks congested to me. So I just don't think you risk it. It's another one you might argue for green. And if you were, and see, this is really an outside bar, and I don't know which way it broke. I'm pretty sure it broke lower first and then turned up. And so unless you want to let it stop you out, you have to keep your stop way up here until this bar closes, and then move your stop down here. And do you really want to take on that much risk for a not so great setup? I don't, so I just don't think you want to enter there. Runs down, and of course you get a second entry here, and it is off that key entry point, but that looks congested. It's nowhere near the EMA. I just don't think it's a great place to enter. And of course we bounce off the lows a few times before it bounces. Again, I don't think you want to go long anywhere in here, but you do get a close outside a new high, and that takes you into 230. So it just there weren't a lot of good trades today. For all that price action and all those big moves, the really good trading was early on here in the morning. And then really from 9:30 to 11:30, I don't see much at all in there. It's just really hard to trade some of that. There's some green ones, but yeah, not a great, for all the strong moves we had. It's a harder day to trade, in my opinion. It's not quite what we've had a lot easier days when you get this much movement than we got today. But there's some strong moves here, and as we talked about several times, the good thing is it's real easy to get 4 ticks if you get your entry right, and sometimes it's real easy to catch a runner, and you get some fairly large runners too. So you got to take advantage of those when you get them. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up and wrap this week up. We'll be back again to do it Monday. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next